Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm Dolly Velasquez, and with me is Pastor Brad Rogers, who is the pastor at Penn Avenue Redemption United Methodist Church. Today we're going to be talking about family. We're going to be discussing family. And Pastor, you've told me earlier that you have a ministry to incarcerated families at Penn Avenue Redemption United Methodist Church. Now, why are you saying incarcerated families?
Well, we are saying incarcerated families because our mission at our church at Penn Avenue Redemption is to those who are incarcerated, who are in prison. And so we actually have inmates that come to our church, and then their families come visit them while they worship, when we feed them lunch on Sundays. And so it is truly a family event.
Now, incarceration is really quite an issue, is what I hear in Oklahoma. How bad an issue is it?
Well, currently I believe there are over 18,000 people that are incarcerated or in prison. And namely, Oklahoma ranks number 1 in the United States for incarcerating women and number 3 for incarcerating men. And that has been that ranking for quite some time, maybe several decades.
Now, somebody might say, well, the father is doing time in prison. How does that affect his wife and his children?
Well, it affects it tremendously, because then you have a source of income that is no longer coming into the household. You have the connection of father or of mother, and many times maybe both, gone or absent in the household. And so that disrupts that unity, that family bond.
So it's devastating economically and for the children. You're saying some of the children have a father and a mother that are in prison.
Many children have a father and a mother in prison.
So how does Redemption help these families then reconnect? And you mentioned you have a meal. What does that look like?
So every Sunday we provide a full meal. It's not just snacks, but a full meal to inmates, to their families, to their children, to all people who come to the church. And that's every Sunday, every week for the year. And so the families are able to come and reconnect, start going back and forming that bond again that was missing in their family unit. And they do that by breaking bread together, by eating, worshiping, singing together, many times crying and going through the past, but not in a hurtful way, but in a healing way.
And part of that is just breaking bread together, isn't it?
Yes.
That our defenses are down. There's a food you could smell of a kitchen.
That's right.
And so are these families that were raised in church, are these church families?
Some of them are, but honestly we have many times where our church is the first church that they have ever been a part of, or maybe even stepped foot in. And that's for the person that's incarcerated and sometimes for their families. And so it's we consider our church a seed planting church, because we have an opportunity for people who meet God for the first time, sometimes ever, and we plant that seed. We're not responsible for growing that seed, but we plant that seed for later times.
Now, Pastor, a lot of people, they say, well, they found religion in jail. Mm-hmm. And then how do you transition the inmates from prison religion to a true relationship with God so that they become followers of Christ?
Well, I think it's not much different than us. The advantage that sometimes people who are incarcerated have is that they have a lot of time, and there are many people that know their Bible probably much better than even I do. And so they come with a lot of knowledge, a lot of spiritual background. And the complication comes that when, we do hear about people finding God in religion, in prison. The complication comes is when they get out and they're working and they're providing, and just like the rest of us, when we have a hard time just surviving sometimes, they do as well. And so that's where the church comes together to provide that component, not just for people in prison, but once they get out of prison. And so that transition into society.
So when you bring the families together and sit down at a meal, I'll tell you the truth. My husband's side of the family, all the family comes in. We have a reunion with 300 people. Nobody fights. Nobody's arguing or anything. On my side of the family, you get them together, and it could be World War III. Something is going to say, does that happen when you sit down with the families in the meals? When they haven't seen each other for years and they come together?
There are certainly times where there are a lot of tensions. It doesn't always come out in the way that we might think it come out. Sometimes it comes out with crying and tears and pain. But many times, they're sitting there and they have nothing to do but talk and to go through that. And so we have a golden opportunity to provide this safe space for people to come through and work through those issues. On occasion, we will have people that have been incarcerated for a long time, and will see their family members for the first time in many years. And so there are times that we will provide, a room and for them to be able to connect in that way.
In privacy.
In reasonable privacy.
Okay.
Because we are still under the guidance of Department of Corrections, and so we have to provide, they are still incarcerated even when they are at our church. And so, but we provide that safe space for people to reconnect.
So I would imagine that there's a lot of emotional issues that need to be healed, not only in the loved ones, but also in the inmates, of anger, resentment, anger issues, as well. Maybe they didn't handle some issues. How are you then able to bring them to a place of healing?
So one of the aspects of our church is, in addition to worship, we worship twice a week, on Thursdays and on Sundays. But on Thursdays, after worship, they have an opportunity to go to class. And so we offer classes for men and women, both for anger management, for addiction ministries, because addiction is a significant part of what they deal with, and becoming sober and recover. And so we offer those classes to help guide them and support them in those issues.
And so what is the guidance? How are these emotions healed?
Sometimes it is just simply the offer of God's grace. Because many times people, us included, have lived a life where, we're under the gun and we're under pressure to, perform. And every time we mess up, then there's somebody there telling us how we have done wrong. And so we offer grace. We model it. We show that, because many times the behavior comes out at church, and we model that forgiveness, and we model offering God's grace to people. And it's a beautiful thing when that happens. And
one of the things that I would imagine when you get these, they're strangers now. Not only are they strangers, they're estranged. How is God's love revealed to bring wholeness to that family and to restore those relationships?
Well, restoration certainly takes a long time, but I'll tell you a story. There was a man, that big guy, you could imagine your big football player type, and I walk around the corner and I find him crying like a little baby. And he apologizes, he's embarrassed, and I say, "What's going on?" And he said, "I just saw my child for the first time, and I just had to say goodbye." And so it breaks people down, but it softens them. It softens our hearts. It softens their ability to reconnect in a loving way, instead of the fast and furious pace that maybe some of them have led through their addiction. And so it's an amazing thing to watch. God's work in our life, in our lives, and in their lives is sometimes a mystery, but it works. And when people finally let down their guard to allow that connection to form once again, they feel God's love. And that was what I saw in that man, was that feeling, maybe for the first time in many years, is God's love and connection to his child.
What is the hope that the inmates have when they come through your program at Redemption?
The hope, I think, for many of them is that they're done. They're tired. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's our favorite saying around there. And it's on them, and it's a big burden to carry. But their hope is that they can put the addiction past behind them, and that they can reconnect with their families, that they can get a job, they can find employment. You know, finding employment is a huge thing, and we celebrate it when people go out and they're able to work, and and many people work during prison because they're at a level that allows them to go out and get a job. That's how they can come to our church, and so that that connection is important there.
And Pastor, what is the hope for the spouses and the children that come into the program to see their loved one, that they're still in prison and yet they're able to share a meal? What is the hope that they have?
The hope is that they can move on and get past that, similar to what the inmates have. When you see the struggle of the mother who has stood beside her child all of his life, and most of his life maybe through addiction and through prison, but he gets out and he's not done. He's not sober, and he gets back into prison. And so the pain that you see in families and in mothers and fathers is all centered around needing that hope that God can give us, that once at some point in their life, their family unit will be whole again. And so as the church, we provide that space to be able to work through those issues, but we also provide that space to be able to have that hope. Because without hope, we may feel that we have nothing.
And what is that hope, Pastor?
That hope is just having family, having that connection, having your loved one not behind bars but within the home, having your loved one where you can pick up the phone and call them at any time, being able to go to the birthday parties, be able to go to their children's soccer games and football games, to live life. That's their hope.
Pastor Brad Rogers, thank you so much. On the bottom of the screen, this is all done by volunteers.
Yes.
And there's more information, beautiful testimonies. At the bottom of the screen, you can find his website and go in there and find more information. And really, when it all boils down to it, God loves us.
Absolutely.
And our hope is that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, for our past sins, and for anything that we've done in the present or the future.
Amen.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more of Joy in Our Town.